everyone, welcome to Felina's Pages, where I make short study guides around 15 to 20 minutes to help remind you of the work that you're studying. I also make other literary content such as books to outfits, reviews, and book selections. So today is a video on A Journey's End by R.C.Sherriff. Thank you to these accounts for making the request. I was happy to film this. This video assumes you've already read the book, so there are spoilers. I usually do a historical background too, but it's all in the book, so let's start with the author biography and then move on to the summary and analysis. Robert Cedric Sherriff was born in 1896 and died in 1975. He was an English playwright who lived through both world wars, which of course massively affected his life. He worked in his father's insurance business after attending Kingston Grammar School, where he was quite sporty, perhaps more into sports than academics, and he then moved on to serve in the First World War in the East Surrey Regiment. While he served, Sherriff mentioned in letters to his parents that he actually had neuralgia, the same disease that Hibbert has in the play. A Journey's End was published in 1928. He drew heavily on his own memories, hence the realism, and the play is set in the British trenches, a dugout before St. Quentin, over 4 days in 1918. Journey's End was very successful and ran for over 500 performances and brought him literary acclaim. However, after that his career sort of flopped and none of his plays were as successful as Journey's End. So he wanted to fight in the Second World War and enlist, but he was in Hollywood at the time, so he couldn't do it. He never married and he lived with his mother, whom he was very devoted to, and he eventually died of renal failure in Kingston Hospital. If you're interested in some more historical context, such as who the characters are based on from his life, I have attached the link in the description box below. The first act takes place on the 18th of March, Monday, 1918. Second act, part 1 on Tuesday morning. Second act, part 2 on Tuesday afternoon. The third act has 3 parts. Part 1 Wednesday afternoon, part 2 Wednesday night, and part 3 on Thursday almost dawn. The trench is about 50 yards from the line, and Germans are 100 yards. First, let's talk about life in the trenches before I move on to the characters and exactly what happens. So furniture is very sparse. There's only a table, a wooden frame that serves like a bed and a chair, also a wooden bench, and 2 more boxes for sitting around. We know from later on in the play that the beds the soldiers sleep on actually have no bottom, so what they have to do is they have to sleep with their arms hanging over the sides because the beds are not actual beds, they're just repurposed window frames. The action takes place in a sort of cavern and there are gloomy tunnels left and right. It's a very sparse surrounding and there's not much furniture. The only pictures are that of barely dressed girls from magazines hanging on the wall. Candles burn day and night because otherwise the darkness would be stifling, and there's also a shortage of matches. The earth walls actually managed to sort of put a damper onto the sounds of the war, so it manages to be a peaceful place too. Even though the living conditions are terrible, people are well aware that their dugout is actually quite good compared to some people's lives outside. There are roughly around 2 million rats scampering around, and there's also a lot of earwigs, so what the soldiers do is they engage in earwig racing, and thus Sherriff shows that the soldiers do not even try to fight. The earwigs do not try to get rid of them because there's simply too many. And no matter what they do, it's no use. So the soldiers instead adapt and they use the circumstances to try and entertain themselves. And it's really a testament to the human spirit, how fierce and strong people can be, and how they use all these different defense mechanisms to come to terms with what they are doing. And another one is humor, which we'll get onto later. Out of other ways the soldiers entertain themselves is they cope by drinking, playing soccer, and writing letters to their family and loved ones. There is also a reference to there being 25 right boots and 9 left boots in the dugout, and we see how the soldiers are not really picky, so they acknowledge and they know where these boots are coming from. It's from their friends' legs being blown off and other violent things that have to do with the war and the fact that they're fighting, but they recognize that, well, sadly everything is sparse and this is the kind of life they lead. With that, let's move on to Act 1. So the scene is quite calm, stars above, moonlight. It's a romantic description. Misty gray parapet of a trench, narrow strip of starlit sky, pale glimmer of moonlight shines down, and this is quite at odds with the reality of the situation and what they're doing. So by juxtaposing them, Sherriff really shows what life is like for those living in peace and for those living in war. And this also makes the cheeriness and the optimism of the soldiers even more stark. We see Captain Hardy, a cheerful chap, just sitting there and drying his sock. He's singing a little song about time, and this way Sherriff shows the theme of time, which he keeps exploring consistently throughout the the play. He builds anticipation so the audience knows that something is coming, because this is war, and sadly death is ubiquitous, it's pretty much everywhere. And this way he also shows how eager the soldiers are to go home, and how nobody really wants to be here just killing fellow human beings. And this is further shown when Osborne walks in, and he says this: he and Hardy discuss that the big German attack's expected any day now, but also that they've been waiting for this attack for a month. And this is a difficult state to be in, a very difficult one. It's one where you always have to anticipate everything and be ready, and just you can never relax knowing that an attack is going to come any minute. This is also highlighted later when Raleigh is given a tip to always keep his boots on, because he has to be ready to go out and fight any moment. Hardy is cheerful also because he has just finished a 6-day shift, and he is heading on home, and Osborne is here to replace him, so he gives Osborne a map of the dugout, and they discuss strategies, and well, they head on out. And Osborne tells him that there's a new soldier coming in today to fight and to pretty much replace Hardy and all the other soldiers that perished or are going home. And Hardy tells the story of a previous new soldier that came in, who on the first night had lumbago disease and went home. And this is the situation here, that this disease is actually not that painful. Apparently, all you do is get minor back pain, so it's not really something to be sent home for, but this really shows the desperation that people had. Osborne says this: I hope we're lucky and get a youngster straight from school. They're the kind that do best. The ones who do best are the soldiers that are desperate, and they recognize that they have their whole life ahead of them, and yet here they are in a trench instead of university or with their friends. They engage in a couple of jokes, say that the sock is guaranteed to keep the feet dry. Trouble is it gets so wet doing it. And we can see the tone is quite casual, and it's another way to deal with the fact that the water in the trench is constantly making their lives difficult. It's every movement is causing them discomfort, quite literally, because of the conditions, yet they have to brush it off. We also have the first instance of seeing desensitization. They're exposed to these terrible traumatic events. They talk about a bomb blowing it up, and they say this: a dugout got blown up and came down on the men's tee. They were frightfully annoyed. So this shows the attitude towards the war. Humor is a defense mechanism. It really reverses the atrocities of what is happening around them. After this conversation, we turn to Dennis Stanhope, one of the protagonists of the play, one of the main ones. He is described as drinking like a fish, and both men respect him, you can see that, but especially Osborne, because he knows the story behind Stanhope. He came straight after school, and he basically has been working all this time with no break. Osborne is the one putting Stanhope to bed. Osborne is the one taking care of him. Osborne is also more mentally stable because he doesn't really engage in alcohol. He's sober, and so Hardy points out that, hey, you're older and you're wiser, so maybe he should be the one in command. But Osborne really denies this because he believes that Stanhope absolutely deserves where he is. And then Hardy says that Stanhope can actually drink whiskey in 1 hour and 40 minutes, an entire bottle, so Stanhope drinks a lot. And let's talk about Stanhope a little bit. Stanhope's father is a vicar, and Stanhope doesn't go home during leave, showing us that he's ashamed of his habits. This is further highlighted in his breakdown over Raleigh, who we find out is the brother of the girl Stanhope loves. Stanhope is scared Raleigh will say he drinks, and so he constantly yells at him. Stanhope is good looking from attractive features rather than the healthy good looks of Raleigh, and Stanhope always looks tired, showing just how overworked he is, yet with the help of alcohol he continues to work. He says that he's a coward, and the reason that he drinks is to forget. Stanhope is a symbol of lost hope, but also perseverance and dedication, as Osborne says, and because he stuck it till his nerves have got battered to bits, he's called a drunkard, which shows the sad reality of the situation, that people take a focus on his drinking habits rather than what he has done, and they don't recognize that it's because of the war that he has turned to this. Mason the cook arrives to set the table after Hardy leaves, and Hardy wants to avoid Stanhope because he says that Stanhope will make him clean the trenches, which shows us just how meticulous the commander really is. Mason says the meat is liver, but it's not really liver. It doesn't look like liver. And he also brings what he says is cutlets, but he admits it himself. It's just the ration meat that he shaped to try and make it look different. And we see that Mason is really trying. He's trying to make this food more appetizing, but we know that it's very low quality, and all the soldiers know, so all of his efforts are going to waste. Raleigh comes. Osborne offers him a drink. It's water mixed with whiskey, and eager to please, Raleigh accepts. And Osborne says this: whiskey takes away the taste of the water, and the water takes away the taste of the whiskey. Raleigh points out that this whole thing is frightfully excited. He's naive and he's eager to serve the country. He's 18, he's described as well-built and healthy looking. He has his entire future cut out. Like, he has his entire future just ahead of him. But this war leaves everything behind, and we as the reader know that most likely Raleigh is not going to make it out alive, and as we know by the end of the play, he doesn't. So we actually find out that Raleigh knew Stanhope before all this. They went to school together, they played rugby and cricket. He really admires Stanhope. He knows him from school, and so he remembers him. He's like his hero, and that's why he asked to be transferred here. And we know that Stanhope is very much a changed man. Raleigh actually points out how he never used to drink or smoke or anything and was very scornful about people doing it. And we yet again have the sense of anticipation of the moment when Raleigh is going to see how his hero sadly changed. And Osborne, being the nice person that he is, tries to soften the blow, point out that the realities of war will change you. But Raleigh is new, he's fresh, he doesn't really understand this yet. So a little bit of historical context. A Mini is often mentioned. It's a trench mortar shell. The full name is Mini Werfer. Raleigh also describes how he got to the trench and saw a lot of very lights, which were lights that the soldiers used to blast out of the trench to see ahead. Osborne urges him to always think of it like romantic if you can. Think of it all as a romantic. It helps. He means the lights. He knows how much the boy's spirit will be tested, and he proposes this as a method of coming to terms with what they're doing, of seeing the lights as not something that illuminates all the death and destruction, but also as something quite pretty and romantic, as he says. Mason enters. He is scared that there's no pineapples today, there's apricots. He's worried about Stanhope's temper. So we get the impression that Stanhope is this just raving drunk, completely broken by the war. But then Stanhope comes in and he sees Raleigh and he's shocked, and he just like asks him how he got there, doesn't really engage, doesn't really yell. And this really shows the complexity of his character, how he's not just someone who's completely lost to all emotion, and how he knows when to control himself, even though later on in the play he utterly loses control before the onslaught of emotion that overcomes him. But in this moment he can think, he can process, and he's very much not just this temper and outburst that everyone has described him as so far. For lunch, another soldier comes in called Trotter, and he's counting down the hours until he can leave. He figures that there's 144, so he draws the circles and he shades them in, and this is a physical representation of both when the Germans are going to attack and when he can go home. Trotter and Raleigh leave to take a shift, and Hibbert comes in, and Hibbert has neuralgia, and he complains to Stanhope, but Stanhope sends him along like, oh, you'll be fine, and then proceeds to complain to Osborne how people here are so weak and the men just want to go home, and why are they not even serving their country. And it is also revealed that he likes Raleigh's sister, which is why he doesn't really want Raleigh to be here, because he's scared that Raleigh is going to report him on in his letters, and he is determined to censor all of Raleigh's letters to make sure that nothing bad is said. She is part of the reason that he has started drinking, actually, because he doesn't want to think that he might not come back to her, and so she is part of his will to live, and he doesn't want that compromised by Raleigh's presence. Raleigh and Osborne talk about their lives before the war, and Raleigh talks about how it feels like he has been here ages, even though it's just his first day. And Osborne tells him the story of humanity during the war. So, for example, he and a friend went to pick up a dead soldier, and they were really scared. They were dragging the friend because the Germans were like right there, but instead the Germans said, carry him, and they actually fired lights to illuminate what was going on. And to which Raleigh replies, it all seems rather silly, doesn't it? And he means that it was a nice action, and the next day they all blow each other to pieces. And so this really shows how the soldiers must get used to the just unending vicious cycle of war, and even all the niceties are rubbed out by the sheer scale of destruction that war wields. Stanhope comes in and says that the attack is expected on the 21st, which is basically the day that Trotter has drawn the circles, and he wants to take a pen and he wants to draw Trotter being blown to pieces. And so we really see how the war has changed his view, how he became this violent person who expects the worst, and we can't even say it's for no good reason. Sadly, experience has taught him this. And he says, "Do you ever get a sudden feeling that everything's going further and further away, so you're the only thing in the world?" He feels estranged from everything, and he drinks himself to oblivion, and he's absolutely terrified that Raleigh will show this new side of himself to the people whom he loves. Raleigh comes in with a letter. Stanhope confiscates it, yells at him, tells him not to call him Dennis, call him Stanhope, yells him out, and then when he opens the letter, it's actually Raleigh talking about how everyone loves Stanhope and everyone praises Stanhope, and it's just a very sad scene of Stanhope realizing what mistakes he made and how he yelled at this poor boy whom he is a hero for no reason. Later that day, the colonel tells Stanhope he has to send Osborne and Raleigh into a raid, so they want to take a German as prisoner and torture him for information on the raid and how it's going to happen, and it's dangerous, and of course it's death to just send out soldiers. And what Stanhope does is he asks, "Are you sure we want Raleigh? Like, he just came in." And this is the reason why the colonel wants him, because he's new, but Stanhope really cares for Raleigh, and so he does try to fight for him, but he eventually has no choice but to accept that he has to send Raleigh in. And after that they talk, and then the colonel leaves, and then Hibbert comes in again, and notice how it's just an endless stream of people coming and going, and that's really what the war is. It's people coming in to replace other people, knowing that death waits around the corners. Hibbert comes in and he tries to desert, but Stanhope says that he just can't justify Hibbert going, because, well, if Hibbert leaves, how can it be that Osborne and Raleigh are staying towards their death? And he threatens Hibbert with a gun because Hibbert is so desperate. And Hibbert by this point is so exhausted from it all that he says, "Just shoot me." Stanhope sees it and he just changes his entire mind. He pats Hibbert on the back, says, "Well done, you stuck it out. Go there, you'll be okay." Hibbert calms down and leaves, and then he goes and he tells Osborne and Raleigh that they have to make the raid. Osborne, after hearing this, is reading Alice in Wonderland, and Trotter says, "I don't see no point in that." Osborne replies, "Exactly, that's just the point." Raleigh, on the other hand, is excited, while Osborne sees the pointlessness of it all, the absurdity of it all. Raleigh says that it's frightfully exciting once again, and he's so proud that Stanhope has chosen him. They wait for the raid to take place and engage in an absurd conversation about Alice in Wonderland, and really, what else is there to say when you're going out and you're potentially going to die? And then they proceed with the sound of bombs, and they go out, and then they come back, and a German boy is captured. Stanhope goes to the colonel and says that the raid is over, and the colonel is so happy that he says Superior is going to be so happy, and Stanhope says with a dead voice, "How awfully nice if the brigadier's pleased." And only then does Colonel remember that actually there were lives lost, and he asks who is dead, and Stanhope replies that 6 men and Osborne. He's asking him questions like, "Did you really think they would come back, knowing that this mission was so dangerous?" And they're adequate questions. But in times of war, this is insubordination, so all the colonel says is, "Don't be silly, Stanhope." And we can see that he kind of brushes off the question. He's not even disciplining him, because maybe he agrees, or maybe he just doesn't care. It's this flippant attitude, yet another example of what people do during the war, and we can see the different attitudes that people take to deal with the situation in all of the different characters. Raleigh and Stanhope get into a fight over Osborne. Stanhope is very upset, so he keeps lashing out, and Raleigh accuses him of not really caring. "How can you care if you're drunk all the time?" To which Stanhope replies that he doesn't understand. Osborne was the only person who understood, and he was like a father figure to him. He says this, "I drink to forget, you little fool, to forget. Do you understand? To forget. You think there's no limit to what a man can bear?" And we can see how, even though we had hope in humanity that Sherriff presented us with in the beginning, this unbreakable spirit, this perseverance, it's also just such a terrible and despondent fact to admit that we have a man so utterly crushed. And even though we as the reader are admiring how they continue to do this, we can see that something fundamental in his character has changed. Act 3, Scene 3, the candle is no longer burning and Stanhope is very poorly disciplined now. Mason has to wake him up and we can see that his hope is extinguished, his will to fight, his discipline, all of this, it's gone along with the candles because it was all Osborne keeping him safe. Raleigh comes in once Stanhope is up, he says cheero, Stanhope says cheero back, so we can see that it's a little bit easier towards each other after that initial fight. Then we hear the bombs and the guns and Raleigh goes out to fight while Stanhope stays and prepares, but then Raleigh comes in and he's injured. They carry him in. He is very gravely injured and Stanhope knows this. Raleigh knows this too. He realizes it. Stanhope stands next to him. He sits with his friend. I mean, obviously he feels regret, but he never says anything. You can just see it in his body language and what he doesn't say. Raleigh recognizing his situation asks Stanhope to go and get some matches to light the candles. Stanhope, wanting to accommodate the boy and make him comfortable in his final moments, obeys, and as he enters, Raleigh is dead. And I like to think personally that in his final moments, Raleigh understood Stanhope and forgave him, and that's why he wanted to spare him the pain of being there. The war isn't over. It's the journey's end only for Raleigh. The war rages on, the killing rages on, and the audience is left with the question, with the incompletion of who will be next, when will the next victim be there. So thank you so much for watching. Sorry to end on such a note, but I do hope that this video was helpful and see you next week.